Today we're going to talk why Russia is invading Ukraine. All the answers are hidden in history. In the past, Kyiv was more powerful than Moscow. Also, sometimes in the past, Ukraine and USA were enemies. Now, I will explain why Putin cannot sleep without thinking of Ukraine. It started back in the 19th century. Kievan Rus was a state occupied by the Slavic people. The city Kyiv was their capital. Between 980 and 1015, the Kievan Rus was ruled by Grand Prince Volodymyr. In Russian, that name means Vladimir, while in Ukraine, that name means Volodymyr. Coincidentally, these are the names of the two presidents of these two countries, Russia and Ukraine. Russians, Ukrainians, and Belarusians draw their lineage from this Slavic state, Kievan Rus. Things changed along the line of history. Ukraine was mostly under Russian rule. In 1900, the two were Soviet republics. Russia was the most powerful of the 15 republics, while Ukraine was the second most powerful. They had defense industries, very large farmlands, and also most of the Soviet nuclear arsenal were located in Ukraine. During the Cold War, Ukraine was the arch rival of USA. The Soviet Union collapsed in 1991. Ukraine became independent, also Russia. Ukraine inherited most of Soviet arsenal but gave it all to Russia in 1994 in exchange for security from Russia, and also Russia should respect the sovereignty of Ukraine. It was signed in the presence of USA, Belarus, UK, and Kazakhstan under the Budapest Memorandum of Understanding. In November 2013, Viktor was the president of Ukraine. He was well known for heavy-handedness, corruption, and most especially his close ties to Moscow. In 2013, he rejected an EU trade deal, which would have created increased activity and influence of the EU in Ukraine. Instead, Viktor decided to take the $15 billion bailout from Russia. Ukrainians felt they had been sold to Moscow, so protests erupted. Protesters at the Independence Square were chanting, "Sign the EU deal! Sign the EU deal! Victor must step down! Victor must step down!" The stage was set. Russia was supporting the president, while the West was supporting the protesters. In February 2014, the government of Viktor Yanukovych was toppled. The president fled to Russia, and all Ukrainians was happy. Most people in Ukraine East wanted Viktor to stay. When he was driven out, the minority felt disabled or deprived of their right. Russia was angry because they had lost their pet. To rescue the situation, Russia had to annex Crimea. Why Crimea? Crimea is a peninsula. That means a land that is in the middle of water with a road connecting it to the land. In 1954, the Soviet leader Nikita transferred Crimea from Russia to Ukraine Soviet Socialist Republic from the Russian Soviet Socialist Republic with the intention of strengthening brotherhood between the two republics. But Ukraine and Russia are part of the Soviet Union, so the transfer looks almost insignificant. But by 1991, when Ukraine gained independence, Crimea joined Ukraine. The peninsula was given special autonomy. It harbored Russian military bases, and Russia promised to honor Crimea's autonomy. Most Russians were against the idea of Crimea joining Ukraine. In 2014, Russia started seizing most government buildings and occupied the area with military presence. On March 16, 2014, a referendum was carried out, and Crimea voted to be part of Russia. Later on, Putin shifted his attention to eastern Ukraine, Donbas, where Russia backed some separatists that have seized some territories. Ukrainian forces did not carry out all-out offensive at first, but on the 17th of July 2014, a Malaysian airline flight carrying 298 people was shut down by these rebels. That was when the Ukrainian forces decided to go offensive on them. The rebels started losing ground. What did Russia do? Russia stepped in and invaded the eastern Ukraine and fought alongside with the rebels. Series of talks ensued between Ukraine, Russia, and the West, and they had a Minsk Accord where both people agreed to cease fire. Ukraine agreed to hold election on the rebel-held areas. 8 years have gone through now, and these agreements remain unimplemented. Ukraine stands as the largest European country after Russia. Today, Ukraine is divided between East and West. The western side see themselves as small European, while the eastern side are closer to Russia. People in the West speak Ukrainian, while one-third of the people in the East speak native Russian language. Western Ukraine suspects all moves that Russia makes every day, while Eastern Ukraine see Russia as their older brother. Ukraine have always been at war with rebels. They occupy two major regions, Donetsk and Luhansk. Together they are known as the Donbas. These are the regions that were occupied by the rebels. Russia have sent its troops stationed right at the border of Ukraine. What does Putin want? Putin wants NATO to stop advancing into the Soviet territory. NATO, being the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, has its countries as founding members, and these other countries joined during the Cold War, while these other countries joined after the Cold War. And today, Ukraine wants to join NATO, but Putin wants Ukraine to be excluded from NATO and any other former Soviet state from its membership. A lot is in history. So when Putin annexed Crimea, his approval rating increased and reinforced Russia's superpower image. From history, many Russians view Ukraine independence as a mistake. Certainly, Ukraine was ruled by Russia. In fact, pre-1991, Ukraine was independent. In modern history, Ukraine have always been under Russia. 1 in every 6 Ukrainians is an ethnic Russian. 1 in every 3 Ukrainians speak Russian as a native language. So Putin was right when he said historically they were one. But claiming Ukraine on the basis of colonial history is not right. It would be like Britain claiming Nigeria or India, or Spain claiming the Philippines. Past imperialism cannot justify present-day expansionism. In history, Ukraine was forcefully ruled by Russia. In 1700, Russian leader Catherine the Greatest started ruling Ukraine by force. Ethnic Russians were shipped to this part of the world. Schools were told to speak Russian language. By 1900, Ukraine language was banned. You can imagine that. In 1930, Soviet leader Joseph Stalin caused a famine in Ukraine, and millions of Eastern Ukrainians were killed. Out of that, that area was repopulated by ethnic Russians. In 1940, Ukrainian ethnic leftovers were relocated and replaced with Russians. That is the reason why many Eastern Ukrainians have so many Russian native speakers. This Eastern Ukraine was a target because it has coal, iron, and a fertile land. The historical connection to Russia was forced. Putin is talking about the Holy Rus. You remember that Slavic state called Kievan Rus that comprises of all the region. Putin said Russian and Ukrainians are one people. 70% of Ukrainians reject this thought. 72% consider Russia to be hostile. 33.3% is ready to take up arms against Russia. Just check this analysis so you see that Ukrainians do not believe what Putin and most Russians hold as historical lineage. The current Ukrainian president, Volodymyr Zelensky, came to power in 2019, winning over 73% vote of Ukrainians. He is well known for his anti-Russian ideas. He represents the large volume of Ukrainians that don't want Russian rulership, but Vladimir Putin wants to be the Soviet Messiah.